So, I'm David, I'm a client director at Decent Storm. I look after our measure success clients like Play.com and House of Fraser. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we've incorporated multi-device into our attribution model that we have had in place with Play.com for over a year now. So, Rakuten's Play.com, obviously everyone knows the brand Play.com within this room, probably, have been a leading e-commerce site for over 10 years. But recently they've gone through some changes. They were acquired by Rakuten, who are the Amazon of Japan, back in 2011. And that led to a change in their business model from a direct retail e-commerce site to a marketplace model similar to an Amazon type business model. Obviously a huge internet presence. They turn over revenues of around £450 million a year. And we've been working with them since 2010. Initially we had in place a very simple last click wins model, where we attributed all reward to the last seen interaction in the user journey. But Play.com have always been very keen to make sure that they understand their user journeys in the best way possible, so that they can attribute reward to the channels that are driving revenue. And very quickly we moved towards our first statistical attribution model in the summer of 2012. And in a similar way to the way we approached the House of Fraser attribution model that Lewis mentioned, we looked at Play.com's data. And we analysed that, and we saw that the biggest driver to drive revenue was interactions with certain traffic sources, certain marketing channels. So we applied weightings based on which traffic sources or marketing channels had played a part in every user journey. So each traffic source would be assigned a certain portion of revenue based on if they appeared within a user journey. So this was the best way that Play.com had ever valued their online marketing channels. But there was an elephant in the room. Everyone knew that there was another piece to this, and that was the multi-device. They knew that users were interacting with their brand across multiple different devices, and that would have an effect on the user journey if you could join those up. So we addressed this problem head on, essentially. Play.com gave us 12 months worth of historical customer data, sales data, and every sale a Play.com customer has a customer ID. So what we were able to do was link every single customer ID to the sales that we'd seen in the last 12 months, and link them to different cookies based on where that user had made a sale on different devices. And what we found was that those single customer IDs, actually 35% of Play.com customers bought from multiple devices within the last 12 months. So we were able to join 35% of those single customer IDs to multiple cookies. Now, obviously there's the impact of people clearing their browser history and their browser cookies, but more importantly, we're joining those multiple cookies to the single user across their work PC, their home PC, their tablet, and their mobile device. So we knew that we had to incorporate that into the attribution model, and we do that on an ongoing basis. So whenever a user logs into their Play.com account, they have a customer ID, and we track that on every visit for that particular user. And at the end of every day in the aggregation process, we join up those customer IDs to as many different browser cookies that we can. And this is where the universal user ID comes in that Lewis and Seth have mentioned previously. We then assign those multiple cookies to one universal user ID so that we can link up user journeys that previously we would have seen as separate as one. So we're doing this for a reason, and we know that desktop and mobile and tablet devices perform very differently, and users behave very differently across those devices. And just to illustrate that point, we analysed data from, I think it was April or May this year, across all converting and all non-converting user journeys separately. So we found that on desktop devices, for converting journeys, desktop devices had a much higher proportion of visits. So people are converting 78% of converting visits were on desktop devices, and only 22% were on mobile devices. But for non-converting journeys, the proportion of visits on mobile devices was much higher. So what that suggests is that people behave very differently across devices, and specifically, they research more on their mobile devices and are more likely to purchase later on within the same user journey on their desktop device. And if we're not able to link up those user journeys, then we're missing a very big piece of the attribution model. So, as we've said, we do link up those users in the universal user ID, and this is the effect that it's had. So, the key thing that I wanted to highlight is these bars on the left-hand side, the brand and direct, and this is what we call navigational channels. So, the navigational channels are channels that we can't optimize, and they're not paid for channels. And essentially what we want to do is attribute revenue to the channels that we can optimize and the channels that we do pay for, because we can have a real effect on those, and we can't really have an effect on the brand and direct channels. And you can see that the last click wins model, initially, nearly 70% of all site revenue was attributed to brand and direct, those navigational channels. And as we move towards the first statistical model, that direct impact dropped significantly. So now, from nearly 70% to just over 50% of site revenue was attributed to those direct and branded interactions. And you can see that much more revenue was attributed across all of the other all the other touch points within a user journey. So email benefited greatly, non-branded SEO benefited greatly as well. But just to really highlight the point, as we continue to add in multi-device, the extra element in the attribution model, the effect of direct is reduced even further. So now we're below 50% of all site revenue being attributed to direct. And what we're doing is we're getting a truer picture of how users are being driven to sites and how your marketing channels are actually performing and driving revenue. And that's key to understanding all the money you're spending in your marketing activity in the best way possible.
You can also see something else in there if you go back. You can answer the question for this example about product listing ads and how significant they are compared to SEO and affiliates and email. You see, they're on a par. They're a bit lower, but they're very significant.
So in the last slide, I highlighted the point of direct and brand, and what we've done here is we've separated out direct on its own. So when people type in the URL into the browser, and we're looking at the revenue share of direct over time. So before we move to our statistical attribution model, just under 40% of revenue was attributed to that specific direct channel. Post the implementation of the multi-device, that direct influence is down to 35% of all site revenue. And just to highlight the fact that we're continually joining up those dots and joining up those users across devices, you can see that when we analyse that effect today, the direct effect is down to just over 30%. So that shows that we're continually giving Play.com the ability to measure their channels more effectively and that they can actually optimise. So revenue attributed to direct visits since we introduced the attribution model and multi-device into that model has fallen nearly 20%.
I think that's really interesting. I think one of the key things with that is that you're I don't think you've got this stat in the slide, but the proportion of multi-touch point journeys that you then have because you've got the multi-device, and I'd guess the reason you can now join that now apportion different to different channels is because there's a much higher proportion of multi-touch point journeys now.
Yeah, well, absolutely. In their model, direct wouldn't get anything unless it was the only traffic source.
Yeah.
So every one of those sales that's been reapportioned wasn't multi-touch point before and is now.
Yeah.
Is nothing else changed about it apart from just the fact that the analysis of data was wrong?
it's better.
Yeah.
It's better.
Well, and that allows you to give value to channels that you weren't giving value to before. It allows you to invest extra budget in those channels, and with that extra budget it becomes economies of scale, and it encourages those, if you have an agency that looks after your PPC, it encourages them to actually, optimise within that channel itself, and perform better as well.
You can be a bit overconfident as well, can't you? If you're looking at information, people just type it in, go on the website, bang, they bought stuff. Whereas if you don't know that they've been on the website 8 times before,
Yeah.
so I suppose you sort of get a bit overconfident in your own kind of branding, don't you? Think you're
Yeah.
doing it all right,
Yeah.
think you've nailed it.
And if you rely on that effect, you ignore the channels that are actually making your brand bigger by capturing people when they're looking for a DVD rather than when they're looking to go straight to play.com.
Yeah, if you believed the last click wins model a couple of slides back, you wouldn't do anything. You'd just coast along on your free direct and natural search brand traffic, and everything would be profit.
That wouldn't quite be, would it?
You eventually get the sack.
Yeah.
And that's exactly I think the approach that the former head of marketing at play.com had, and this is a slide that he actually presented at a previous Actionable Insight event. And he knew that he couldn't just rely on that last click wins model that attributed so much value to that direct traffic source. And he showed that since we moved to the multi-device model from the original last click wins model, that he was able to attribute 62% more of his revenue to those paid for optimizable channels at the same efficiency targets. So what he's saying is he's able to move away from relying on direct and actually make his paid for, his optimizable channels better. And then, just to leave you with this slide really, is we've looked at from a last click wins model to a first statistical model to then the multi-device model. And it shows that this attribution model evolution is iterative. You can't just put one thing in place and leave it at that. You need to keep incorporating new things. You need to incorporate multi-device. Think of the effect that tracking your mobile apps will have as well, and the ability to link users across your apps to your website traffic. And on this graph here, you've got the blue line, which is the line of truth, which is the I'm measuring all of my channels to exactly how they're performing. And let's say at the very left-hand side, we've got the last click wins model. We're very far away from the truth, but every time we try to get closer to it by incorporating new things, we are getting closer to that line. And if we don't do that, we'll just stay very, very far away from the truth.